We use words like smart and intelligent all the time, right? But what are we actually talking about? Is it just about acing tests? Or is there something more to it? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig in and try to unpack this huge, fascinating, and yeah, sometimes controversial idea of intelligence. Okay, so let me ask you this. Are you book smart or street smart? Seriously, think about it. We all know someone who's a genius in a library, but maybe, a little lost in the real world. And the other way around, too. This one question really gets to the heart of the puzzle we're tackling today. Is intelligence just one thing, or are there a bunch of different ways to be smart? All right, to get to the bottom of this, we've got to rewind the clock. Our story starts more than 100 years ago with this big quest. Psychologists were trying to pin down this slippery idea of smart. They were on the hunt for a single universal thing they could measure, something that explained why some people seem to pick things up way faster than others. Now, this definition from the psychologist David Wexler is a fantastic place to start. And notice the key words here. It's not just about what you know. It's a global capacity. It's about how you function, how you think, how you act, and how you use whatever you've got to deal with challenges. It's about being effective in the world. But, this idea of one single thing called intelligence, it got complicated really fast. First, you had Alfred Binet, who kind of saw it as one general ability. But then, pretty quickly, you get Charles Spearman, who comes along and says, well, there's a G factor, a general intelligence, but also a bunch of specific little S factors. And right on his heels, Louis Thurstone jumps in and says, no, you're both wrong. There's no G at all. There are 7 totally separate abilities. And just like that, the debate was on. So with all these different ideas flying around, what came out of it? Well, the most famous and definitely the most controversial result was the attempt to take all that complexity and boil it down to just one number, the IQ score. The original idea was actually pretty clever. What Binet and Simon did was, first, they'd figure out a child's mental age. Basically, they'd see what an average kid of a certain age could do. Then, they'd compare that to the child's actual biological age, their chronological age. Then, a psychologist named William Stern took that comparison and came up with a simple little formula to turn it into a score. And here's the key. They set the average score to be 100. So if you're 10 years old and you're performing at the level of an average 10-year-old, your mental age matches your chronological age. Boom! Your IQ is 100. It created this simple, easy-to-understand scale where you could be average, above average, or below average. Now this was a totally revolutionary tool, no doubt. But it leads to a huge question, one that people started asking almost right away. Can you really, truly capture the complexity of a human being with just one number? Is that the whole story? And that question, well, it changed everything. It sparked a huge shift in thinking, pushing psychologists to explore brand new ways of understanding intelligence, ways that went way beyond a single score. You see, the old way, the psychometric approach, was kind of like trying to figure out the ingredients of a cake. It was all about the structure, what's it made of. But the new information processing approach asked a totally different question. It asked, how does the baker actually make the cake? It focused on the process, the actual steps our brains go through when we think and solve problems. Think of it like this. You wouldn't describe a box by only giving its length, would you? Of course not. You'd need the width and the height to really get it. Well, these new theories argued that intelligence is the exact same way. It's multidimensional. A single number just can't give you the full picture. And this new way of thinking just opened the floodgates. It led to some really groundbreaking modern theories that suggested there isn't just one type of intelligence, but a whole spectrum of different kinds of smarts. This quote from Howard Gardner pretty much says it all. He totally flipped the script. He argued that we should stop asking, how smart are you, and start asking, how are you smart? That's a game changer. So Gardner came up with at least 8 different kinds of intelligence. You've got your word smarts, like a great writer, your number smarts, like a scientist, but then there's body smarts, like a dancer or an athlete, or people smarts, like a skilled politician, or self smarts, like a philosopher. He said each of these is its own valid form of intelligence. Now, around the same time, another psychologist, Robert Sternberg, came up with his own influential model. His triarchic theory breaks it down into 3 main types. First, you have compositional, which is basically your analytical intelligence, the book smarts that help you solve problems on a test. Second is experiential, or creative intelligence, using what you know in new, innovative ways. And third, there's contextual intelligence, which is also called practical intelligence. Sound familiar? And there it is. We've come full circle. Sternberg's theory gives us a real psychological term for what we call street smartness or business sense. It's that ability to just handle everyday life, adapt to situations, and get things done in the real world. So the answer to that first question? Yeah, both book smarts and street smarts are very, very real. Okay, so if there are all these different ways to be smart, that leads us to the biggest question of all. Where does it come from? Are you born with it or do you learn it? It's the classic, epic debate, nature versus nurture. Well, studies on twins have given us some incredible clues. Just look at this chart. That first bar shows identical twins who were raised together. Their IQ scores have a correlation of 0.90. That is an almost perfect match. But now, look at the middle bar. This is the mind-blowing part. Even when identical twins are raised apart in totally different families, their scores are still super similar. That's powerful, powerful evidence that our genes, our nature, play a huge role. But hold on, our genes aren't the whole picture. Because that correlation isn't a perfect 1.0, we know that the environment, our nurture, also has a huge impact. So today, the scientific consensus is clear. It's not nature or nurture. It's a complex, constant dance between the two. Our genes might set a potential range for our intelligence, but it's our life experiences that help decide where we actually end up within that range. And that really brings us to the biggest takeaway of all. After more than a century of research, the whole conversation has shifted. We've moved from trying to rank people on a single line to trying to appreciate all the different and amazing ways people can be intelligent. So maybe the best question isn't about figuring out if you're smart, but about discovering and embracing how you're smart.